Sherrod Blakely, NBC Boston, joins us now to take a little closer look at last night's game as the Celtics are now up 2-0 over the Sixers. Sherrod, what has happened to my man?
Hey, what's going on?
We're down 0-2. It's gloom and doom here in the great city, Philadelphia. I like your tweet that maybe Brett Brown has a clause in his contract that pays him extra for keeping his timeouts. It's been a big topic here, whether he should have taken a timeout or should not have taken a timeout. The energy in that building, now you were there, we're not. Did it suggest, like, man, his team's really losing it right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just look at the run itself. I mean, 25-8 is huge. Very few teams allow that type of run to go about happening without a timeout or some type of stoppage of play to try to, slow the bleeding down. We're all sitting there just kind of, as the Celtics kept scoring and scoring, we're wondering, when is Brett going to try to slow this down? And it never came until the end of the half, which was interesting because it was the first time they led at halftime in the postseason. So that was that whole last 6 minutes, 40 seconds of the second quarter was just really bizarre.
And a game changer, right? I mean, realistically, that whole back and forth kind of changed the game because Boston gets back in, and then they were allowed to, what was Philly able to do to build that lead that they were not able to do once the game got close again? How were they able to get to that point?
Well, first of all, J.J. Redick was ridiculously hot. I mean, he scored first 8 points of the game, not just of the Sixers, but of the game. And so he was knocking down shots. I thought they were getting to a lot of those 50-50 balls that they just weren't getting at all in game one. I thought they got a lot more of those in game two. And they were really playing at a very good pace, a very good rhythm that suggested that they were playing their brand of basketball. But then it stopped. The Celtics started slowly getting back into the game. And again, I go back to the fact that Brett didn't call a timeout. I'm still, scratching my head as to what he was thinking or not thinking at that point. Because, you got to do something when you're playing, when your team plays that well to come out in the first half and they're hitting, obviously, a Celtics run. You've got to do something to slow that down.
Talking with Sherrod Blakely about the Sixers and the Celtics. Do you think that the Sixers should have stuck with TJ over Ben Simmons, or did going back to Ben Simmons play right into Boston's hands?
I think in that situation, you've got to look at both the short and long-term consequences of that decision. And long-term, I think you had to put him back in because if you were to keep TJ in the game, you may win that game, but you have rattled your future franchise-type player, Ben Simmons, in a way that I don't know if he will be able to recover from in this series. And so if you're Brett Brown, I would have made the same decision. I would have gone back to him because the way he was playing, I mean, in the back of your mind, you got to be thinking, he can't possibly be any worse than he's already been. So that and the fact that he is such an important piece to this franchise going forward, I would have definitely put him back in just like Brett did.
Now, you tweeted out about a breakdown of who defended Ben Simmons and said #team effort, but maybe none more so than Marcus Morris and the job he did. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys listed in there, but what about the job specifically that Marcus Morris did on Ben Simmons?
Well, I think that's been the guy that has given him the most problems. And it really comes down to just physicality, toughness, gritty, and shocker, Morris is from Philly, so he embodies, what this city is about. And I think Ben Simmons, he's dealing with that in a very up close and personal way that he probably doesn't want to.
So the Sixers held Horford, Rozier, and Tatum to 54 points compared to 83 in Game 1. But what do they need to do in Game 2? What do they need to do in Game 3 in order to get the win?
I think we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but Ben Simmons, he has to put his imprint on the game. He's the guy, the straw that stirs the drink. He's the guy that when this team is playing well, you look at all the different stats that they rack up, and Ben, his numbers stand out in a big way. The Celtics have done a great job of limiting him, giving him different looks, putting him in positions where he is not comfortable. And I've said this time and time again about Ben Simmons. At some point, he has to develop a mid-range jump shot. You don't have to become Ray Allen or from three-point range. You don't have to become, DeMar DeRozan, but you have to be respectable from mid-range because he's getting to the elbow area and there's a wall. defensive wall right there. Either the guy that's defending him is there, or they've got help that won't allow him to get any further. And if he can't knock down that shot, this is what happens. He's not as aggressive, he's not as assertive, and the Sixers aren't nearly as good a team. He's got to develop that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Sherrod Blakely, NBC Boston, with us here. Boston is yet to win a playoff game on the road. So, and everybody talked about how Brad Stevens has been great, and he has had such a great, game plan. What was wrong with Brad Stevens and the game plans when they went to Milwaukee?
Well, a couple things. First of all, Milwaukee, I think they just played more desperate brand of basketball. They played harder than the Celtics. I mean, it really wasn't an X's and O's type thing. Milwaukee deserved to win those games in their building. They played hard. They built huge leads. The Celtics weren't able to cut. The Celtics are used to cutting into big leads and finding ways to win. They weren't able to do that in the Milwaukee series. But as the players reminded me time and time again, this is why you go all out in the regular season, so that you can have home court advantage, so that if it does come down to a Game 7 in a playoff series, you're going to get it in your building.
So then my follow-up to that would be, we're saying, okay, the 2 games are Philly, Boston did what they had to do. If Philly wins the 2 games here, did Philly show you enough that would worry the Celtics to say they could steal a Game 5 or Game 7 in Boston, or is it as simple as the home teams are going to hold serve in this one and advantage Boston?
Well, when you look at the first 2 games, and I hate to keep beating up on the kid, but Ben Simmons, if he has a typical Ben Simmons type game, they can win in Boston. There's absolutely no doubt about that, because a typical game for him involves him scoring, get his teammates involved scoring, and putting a lot of stress on the team's defense. Ben's very good at that. But that we didn't see that transpire in games 1 and 2. And yeah, you look at Game 2. I mean, the first half it was pretty much all Philly up until the last 5-6 minutes of the second quarter. So they have the ability to, no question, win a game in Boston. But I'm really curious to see whether Philly is going to do what I think they should be able to do, is hold home court at home. Because listen, again, Joel Embiid is a phenomenal player. Everyone agrees with that. That's indisputable. But Ben Simmons is the key to this team getting on to the next round. If he is putting up 0 for 4 games and having, or Game 1 where he had more turnovers than assists, they're not going to go any further than this.
Hey, Sherrod, I tweeted out last night that I said every time I see Tatum throw one down like that, I just cringe, because I know the book on Fultz barely has chapter 1, but, man, that number 0 sure looks good. He's averaging 21.1 points per game against the Sixers in 6 games this season. You think he has a chip on his shoulder when he sees it's Philly on the other side? Yeah, you doubted me? Well, boom.
Yeah, he's that kind of kid. And the thing about it, he's so low-key about it. I mean, he's just one of those guys who'll drop 20 on you and then be like, oh, not a big deal. That's kind of what I do. The Celtics, without question, that was a guy that they felt was going to be the best fit for them. And in Philly, the story is yet to be written about Markelle Fultz. I still think he's going to be a good NBA player. But right now, clearly Tatum has won that head-to-head battle, not only in terms of impact right away, but just when you look at his skill set. He's going to be a really good player. I mean, I think we will, without question, be talking about him in all-star conversations probably in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Hey, Sherrod Blakely, ESPN, NBC Boston here on 97.3 ESPN. My bad. As we look
who works for who?
If we look at these 2 teams, okay, I think we thought, most people, and they said this on the Philly postgame last night here on NBC Philadelphia, which was they overlooked Boston in terms of they didn't think they were as good as maybe they are. Is that the case? Is Boston better than maybe most people who look at them give them credit for? Do they have some synergy as a unit?
They do, and they've had no choice but to rely on that to be successful. I mean, when you lose a guy like Gordon Hayward 5 minutes into the season, then you lose Kyrie for all the playoffs, and a guy that you don't hear a lot of people talk about, Daniel Tice. He was their power forward off the bench, rookie from Germany, high energy guy, the kind of guy that in a best of 7 series, he would help you win at least one game with his effort. You lost him for the season. So there were a lot of pieces that were central to the Celtics' success this season that weren't in the picture. But here's the thing you got to remember. Jason Tatum, number 3 pick. Jaylen Brown, number 3 pick. Al Horford, a number 3 pick. Terry Rozier, 16. They have guys who are highly sought after when they came into the league. And so I think people, they lock in on the not having Kyrie and not having Gordon, but forget that the Celtics have a ton of lottery caliber talent on their roster that is playing with a chip on his shoulder. And when you put those two things together, I think you see what we're seeing on a day-in-day basis. And that's a team that, in the eyes of others, is overachieving. But in their eyes, they're just doing what they're supposed to do.
Hey, is it fair to ask that maybe they're not as good as a defensive team if Kyrie's out there, that they're actually a better defensive team with Rozier out there for more minutes?
Yes. I mean, Rozier is a better defender than Kyrie, and that's not a knock on Kyrie. It's just that, he's better. Rozier's better. But what Rozier is doing, and this is what makes what's happening now so unique, is he's giving you similar offense that you were getting from Kyrie. And when you combine those two things, that's why the Celtics have been so successful, because they're getting basically Kyrie, but a better defender version of Kyrie. And that is kind of scary when you think about it. And that's why Rozier was one of those guys that teams were aggressively trying to pry from the Celtics' hands leading up to the trade deadline. And the Celtics were just like, nah, we're good. We'll keep him. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I saw that graphic last night on NBC Sports Boston. I saw it on Twitter and grabbed it because I like the full-screen graphics that say new king in the fourth. 56 points in the postseason in the fourth quarter, 13 assists, 18 for 27 shooting. Sherrod, he had 8 points last night, and no turnovers. That's the biggest thing. No turnovers in the crunch time of the game.
Well, the one thing about Rozier that has been really a constant throughout the playoffs is he's had a low assist to turnover ratio. In fact, after the Milwaukee series, his assist to turnover ratio was like 4.22, and that was tops among all players in the postseason who were playing more than 30 minutes and averaged more than 6 assists. So he was playing major minutes, getting good numbers in terms of assists, but making very few mistakes. And he's been like that really throughout the postseason and really in the regular season. But we didn't really appreciate it in the regular season because he was coming off the bench. He wasn't playing as many minutes, but clearly he has been able to just really extend that to where he's playing starter-like minutes and still low turnovers, high assist numbers.
Hey, Sherrod, if you're looking at the Sixers right now, what's the number one adjustment Brett Brown needs to make?
Well, I think there's two adjustments. I think you need to really find ways to get Ben Simmons the ball on the block, just so he can get his confidence going, get some shots to fall down, create some mismatches where Terry Rozier is defending him, and then just really try to ISO that matchup and get some offense that way. And also, I would put Rob Covington full-time on my guy, Jason Tatum. That is the guy that has really given him a lot of problems. Tatum has had 20-plus points in his last 4 playoff games, which for anyone is pretty impressive if you're not like an established superstar. But we're talking about a 20-year-old rookie in his first, foray in the postseason to be that consistent. So those are the two adjustments I would definitely make if I'm Brett.
Is the Tatum Fultz story a big story in Boston? I mean, here everybody's like, you shouldn't have made the trade. You didn't need to trade up. Like, the one thing I would say is if Boston legitimately was going to take Tatum regardless, because people act like, well, you could have just got Tatum at 3. Unless you believe that Boston was legitimately going to take Tatum at number 1, you still most likely are ending it with Fultz. You just wouldn't have had to make a trade to go get him.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I mean, Danny was sending up some serious smoke signals. We may take Fultz at 1. We may take Tatum at 1. You don't really know, Philly. You don't really know. And so that he played that game to perfection. But in Boston, it's not really that big a storyline now. It's only whenever the two teams play. And even in this playoff series, because Fultz isn't playing, it's not that big a deal. I had a chance to talk to Tatum a little bit about just the relationship because him and Fultz are friends. They've come up through the AAU circuit together. They've known each other for years, and so there is a friendship there. But Tatum made it absolutely 100% clear to me that he's not having many words for Fultz at this point in the season because this is the playoffs. It's about winning, and I don't have time to be buddy-buddy with anyone. And so I thought that was really, really telling to show you just where this 20-year-old's head's at. He's not – he has figured out already how to differentiate between regular season games and being friendly with guys, and postseason, it's me and my team, and that's it. He's got that bunker mentality down to a science.
Sherrod Blakely covers the Celtics for NBC Boston. He joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Sherrod, we will see you in Philly.
Sounds good.